Hi everybody, Erica here from Bravo Migration to talk to you about work permission for international students, which seems to be the hot topic of the moment. We have seen for decades that international students in Australia could work legally. However, they had a limitation of hours imposed to that work permission. For years, the limitation was 20 hours a week. A few years ago, that changed to 40 hours a fortnight, so 40 hours per 2 weeks, which may or may not be different for people who have casual jobs. It may affect them differently. If you have a permanent job and you work 20 hours a week, that didn't affect you much. In January 2020, with the country opening up again for international students after almost 2 years of borders closed, the government, in a decision never seen before, relaxed that limitation for international students to only work a certain number of hours. And for the first time ever, allowed international students to work as many hours as they wanted. This was because the country was and still is suffering dramatically with the effect of those almost 2 years where we had borders closed to temporary student visa holders. That included tourist visa holders, working holiday visa holders, and international students. With 2 years of borders closed, the workforce felt it very hard. In practice, what we had been saying for years, that temporary visa holders in Australia are an important part of the workforce and therefore of the economy. So the government, in an attempt to fix the problem, at least on a short-term basis, allowed international students to work unlimited hours, and that was in January 2022. But they told us back then that this was going to be a temporary decision. So we knew it was coming to an end. But for almost the whole year of 2022, we didn't know when that relaxation of the limitation of international students and their work permissions would end. Late in 2022, the government finally announced, the new government. By then, we had a new government in power after the elections last year. The new government announced that they were going to go back to normal, having students only work a certain number of hours a week or a fortnight. They were going to go back to that on the 30th of June 2023, which is when the financial year ends. So we saw a lot of employers and international students react negatively to this decision, because even though the borders have been open for over a year now, we still have a huge shortage of skilled and unskilled labor in the country. So until the 30th of June 2023, if you hold an international student visa as the primary holder, if you are the student, or if you are a dependent, a family member of an international student, and you have a student visa, you are still able to work unlimited hours. But in the end of the financial year, on the 30th of June 2023, it's going to go back to limitations. Now, that was announced end of last year. Just recently, the government announced that they, were going to stick to that decision, which is something employers were hoping they were going to take back and grant a bit of an extension or postpone the end of the relaxation. The government confirmed it's going to end in June. However, they increased the limitation of working hours from 40 hours a fortnight to 48 hours a fortnight. So if you have a permanent job where you work a certain number of hours every week, from June onwards, from the 30th of June onwards, so from July really, you will be able to work 24 hours a week instead of 20. Now, obviously, this is good. We're not saying it's not good, but in practice, it doesn't really help people with their finances while they're studying that much more. But worse, it doesn't help Australian employers who are out there desperate for skilled workers. So what we've been seeing since this announcement, and really since the confirmation that the work relaxation would end, are employers really looking at visa options for their international student visa holders who work in their businesses. They're thinking about, is there a visa that I can facilitate in any way to my employees so they can work unlimited hours after July next year, this year, next financial year. And we, being migration advisors, not only of individuals, but also of employers, we've been sitting down with employers and working out what visa options they could facilitate for their employees. The most common options are obviously the sponsorship work visa. It's a temporary visa where the international student can work full-time, unlimited hours for that sponsoring employer. But the international student has to have an occupation that is part of the program. The position being offered has to be part of the migration program. And that person applying for the visa has to meet minimum criteria so to be eligible for that visa. That includes having a relevant qualification in that occupation, as well as at least 2 years of full-time relevant work permission. Part-time work is accepted under policy, but it will be counted on a pro rata basis. We also have to show evidence that person has a minimum level of English, which I would say it's intermediate plus. Now, the best option in terms of a visa that an employer can facilitate for an employee in Australia is a permanent employer nomination visa, also known as subclass 186. Now, that visa is not for everyone. The threshold of criteria for the visa applicant is higher than for the sponsorship, and that person needs to have a positive skills assessment in their nominated occupation, not 2, but 3 years of relevant work experience in a relevant position as well. And they have to have what is called in the legislation competent English, which in real life translates to upper intermediate to advanced English proficiency. There's also a regional sponsor visa, subclass 494, that even though it's temporary at first, leads to a permanent visa after 3 years if that person works in what is called a regional area. Now, we say that in all our videos and webinars, regional area for the purposes of visas and migration in Australia doesn't mean the dead heart of the country, the desert, or anything like that. It literally means the whole country, with the exception of the 3 most populated cities, which are Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne. So if you have a job offer in Adelaide, in Perth, on the Gold Coast, in the whole Northern Territory, Tasmania, Canberra, Newcastle, Wollongong, Cairns, those are all considered regional areas for the purposes of visas and migration. So why would you choose a 494 regional sponsorship visa instead of a normal, regular sponsorship visa? If your occupation is not on the high demand list, the medium and long-term skills shortage list, even if you get a 482, you won't be able to proceed to a permanent 186 visa after a while. So a lot of people have to resort to finding work outside of Sydney, Brisbane, and Melbourne so they can get a 494 and then 3 years later get a permanent visa. So we have helped lots of international students, backpackers holding working holiday visas, lots of temporary visa holders obtain a 494 with their regional employers so they can proceed onto a permanent visa. Now, if you're watching this and you have an employee who's not that skilled, or if you are an international student who doesn't have a lot of work experience or doesn't have the right qualifications for your role, there's also an option that is a visa called subclass 407 training visa. This visa, as the name says, is for the person to be trained on the job and work full-time still for that employer. So the employer is able to fill that skill shortage in their business, but the employee is also gaining some more skills. This visa can be approved for up to 2 years, and later that person can proceed to a sponsorship visa or even something else. So regardless if you are an employer or an employee, get in touch with us. We can assess what visa, if any, is the best option for your employee or for you, and create a visa pathway for you. Now, don't leave it for too late. The unlimited work rights are ending in June, and it's March already as I record this. So the department is still dealing with a lot of backlog from previous applications. Get something lodged as soon as possible. So by June, when the temporary relaxation ends, you or your employee can continue working unlimited hours. Get in touch with us. You can see our contact details on the description of this video, and we're here to assist you. Thanks for watching, and until our next video, bye.